Welcome to the Podunk Polymath, a podcast dedicated to the sentiments of a secular, sarcastic, screwed-up Southern SJW and skeptic. I'm your host, Chris. Come on in. This is episode 18 of the Podunk Polymath podcast. Thanks once again for joining me. Hope y'all have been doing okay. For the pre-ramble, I wanted to mention a little something about a little report that just came out by the CIA saying that Russia definitely did have something to do with getting those emails released, hacked emails released to WikiLeaks, those Hillary Clinton emails, and Obama has ordered a full-scale investigation. So it looks like we're going to have a little interesting problem here when the electors vote, the Electoral College vote here soon. I am a little frightened, to be quite honest with you. I don't really want a bloody revolution, some sort of civil war. I don't think anything is going to happen, and I hope that I'm overblowing things. I don't know, but it just, everything feels so screwed up right now that it's hard to get a mental hold on everything. But if it's true that they had any significant impact on the election, I don't know what we do. Do we rerun the election? And how's all the Trumpsters going to deal with it? Is there going to be a revolt? Is there going to be some sort of mass demonstrations? I don't know what the fuck's going to happen, but I don't know. I mean, everything's so up in the air lately that it's hard to get a grasp on anything like I just said, and it's pretty scary. So I advise everybody to keep an eye on that. I also wanted to mention that I read a book cover to cover, which is not really cover to cover considering the fact that it was an ebook, but I read The PC Lie, Why Voters Decide That I Didn't Matter. Was that right? By Riss McCool. I hope I got the subtitle of the book right. But it's a great book. I just found out about her. She's transgender, and she's basically wrote the book in 9 days and told of the first chapter is her basically venting, and she admits this, of course. And she's cursing a lot, which I don't have any problem with, obviously, but she's pissed off about the election, about Trump being elected, about so many people not giving a fuck about her rights as a human being. And I can completely understand that. I'm a white cis hetero guy, but I can understand the fear, and I feel that fear for other people like her, and like, women, people of color, all minorities are threatened by this administration, upcoming administration, I think. So I urge you to go read the book. She's appeared on Callie Wright's of course, the Atheist Manifesto. She's been on a couple other podcasts. She also has her own podcast, Inciting Incident. I'll put a link up to that, as well as her book. I encourage everybody to go read this book. I think it's very important that people like her get their voices out and everybody understands what the fuck's at stake here. I mean, this is no joke. This is some serious shit. Trump may be a narcissist. He may be a misogynist, a racist, but nobody knows what he's going to really fucking do, and I think it's the unpredictability that scares everybody. Plus, when you got Pence as a vice president who has already said that he wants to use conversion therapy on gay people, and he passed a bill in Indiana that makes people bury their fetuses after abortions, well, you can do the math on that one. I mean, it's pretty sickening. Go read her book. It's called The PC Lie, How American Voters Decided I Don't Matter. I'm sorry. And she also has some essays at the end. A couple of... Eli Bosnick notably wrote an essay. And I believe Andrew Torres did, from Opening Arguments, did a essay as well as a couple other people. She's an inspiring figure. She's a brilliant person. She's graduating from the Ivy League after not even having graduated high school. So she's definitely inspiration. I'm going to have her on, actually. I'm going to interview her next week, probably. I shouldn't have jinxed it, maybe, but it's almost certainly going to happen next weekend, and then that episode will probably be out the next week. But I really look forward to talking to her, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to somebody who has influenced so many people and so many people's lives, I think. And she has the potential to do much more. I also wanted to mention that I just became aware of a song that friend of the show and two-time guest Matthew O'Neill composed called Atheist Miss. It's pretty fucking funny and cool, and y'all need to check it out. I'll put a link up to it so you can give it a listen. I'm going to play it when I usually play the promos here on the show.
So get back to me and let me know what you think, but I think it's pretty awesome.
This week on the Palaver, I have somebody that I actually, of course I always say this, but he is somebody that I admire. He's one of my favorite writers in the movement, I guess, the movement. Sincere Kirabo. He, of course, is the social justice coordinator over at American Humanist Association, as well as many other things you'll hear me say on the Palaver. But I really enjoy talking to him. He's very eloquent, articulate, because he's a black guy. Of course, that sounds racist as shit, but I'm being honest. He's one of the more articulate guys, and he's a master with language, I think. So I hope that you enjoy the rest of the show.
The very worst, the temples, synagogues, and church take great offense if I open my mouth and talk sense. And everyone tells me how I'll go to hell. Happy holidays is harder than you may as well. Piss on their face. These people are such a disgrace. Oh no, no, this holidays taking over the radio. Oh no. Taking over the radio. Surrounded by Christmas lights. Santa Claus can just fuck off. We'll have each other tonight and we'll survive. Surrounded by Christmas lights. Santa Claus can just fuck off. We'll have each other tonight. We'll start a new holiday together. Include atheists too. We'll start a new holiday to get to include atheists too. We'll start a new holiday to get to include atheists too. We'll start a new holiday to get to include atheists too. And we'll survive, surrounded by Christmas lights. Santa Claus can just fuck off. We'll have each other tonight and we'll survive. Surrounded by Christmas lights. Santa Claus can just fuck off. We'll have each other tonight.
Welcome to another edition of Palaver here on the Podunk Polymath Podcast. This week I have a gentleman with me that I'm actually very excited to have on. He is a social justice coordinator at the American Humanist Association. He's also a longtime activist and one of my favorite writers, I must say. He has worked on humanist.com and Everyday Feminism. So if you will join me in welcoming Sincere Kirabo. How's it going?
Hey man, how's it going?
Did I get the last name right? I forgot to ask.
Yeah, you did. You did, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Usually people butcher it, but you got it right.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I meant to ask you before, but I forgot. So I wanted to mention that I had actually met you at the East Tennessee Free Thought Advance, which at first I didn't understand what the hell the advance meant, but it's because usually you say retreat, but it was kind of a play on words. We're advancing instead of retreating, so it was kind of a pun, I guess. So anyway, and I saw you there, I met you, and I got to take you to Sonic, and you got to have that lovely food. for the first time.
Yeah, that was the first time I've ever been there.
So I thought that was fun. And you gave a speech. Can you tell me real quick what the speech was about? Do you recall?
Oh, it was basically talking about a more quote unquote radical humanism and discussing ways we can apply critical thinking beyond just critiquing religious hegemony.
Right. And I remember listening to your speech, and I was thinking, I brought up a question about the kind of the YouTube atheists or whatever, and how they're kind of seem to be splitting opinion. But you're like, man, I don't even give a shit about them. I'm just worried about, keeping my eyes on the prize as far as humanism goes. And that's what we probably all should be doing, not letting these kind of petty arguments kind of get in the way of that. And so my show is pretty much social justice oriented and humanism, as well as secular. So what role does humanism, or how do they intertwine humanism and social justice?
Well, I mean, this is funny because there really shouldn't, I'm still not quite sure I understand what the whole resistance is to the term social justice, obviously, but also resistance within humanist communities, because the ethical framework of humanism isn't only compatible with seeking social justice, it craves it and it aspires towards it. So I'm not sure I understand. And see, for the most part, to be honest, I haven't really come up against too many naysayers, at least within when we're talking about, because I work with AHA, at least when we're talking about in regards to when I go to events or anything related to AHA types of initiatives that I'll go to or I'll be a part of. But it tends to be the case, just like you were referring to YouTube atheists or whatever. I don't even know of any of them other than Arn Ra. I don't pay attention to that. But people online. And so you see a lot of nastiness online. Usually, and you have a lot of resistance from certain folks who, I'll put it like this, for those who have a problem with social justice activism or anything along those lines, I'll put it like this. It's like, if it is the case that humanism is a philosophy premised on human-derived ethics and reason and accountability, and that those principles are to be not only considered in the abstract and in mere theory, but in action, if we're actually supposed to apply them as a praxis, then how can one not conclude that the fulfillment of these beliefs isn't challenging injustice or isn't opposing adverse attitudes and social systems that dehumanize or negatively impact certain groups of people in a disproportionate way? So when we're talking about social justice, we're talking about the very same concerns noted in the very first Humanist Manifesto, conceived in 1933, that affirmed that the necessity of humanists to fight for life conditions that are satisfactory for all and not just the few or very few. So for those who say otherwise, I cannot help but question their investment in a life stance that, as Daniel Dennett stated, entails a devotion to social responsibility. So that's why it's not confusing. I just look at people who take issue with it, and I'm like, okay, because I question to what degree they actually are humanists. And I hate to even say that, because I get that everyone's different. I get that everyone's not going to view the world differently. But seriously, if we're talking about the fact that humanists generally agree that rather than divine intervention, we must concern ourselves with human-derived determination of justice and equality. That's generally a principle that humanists agree on. At least that's something that we work towards. So then it necessarily must follow that if there's a surplus of value being granted to some and withheld from others, that it's up to us to do something about it. And what's more, a humanist will look at such a predicament or state of affairs and want to do something about it. So those who self-identify as humanists that remain on the sidelines in silence or resist social change or social justice activism, or they heckle or even denigrate it, then I can't help but question what exactly they mean when they identify as humanists.
Well, to be honest, I don't think they identify as humanists.
Oh, some of them do. I've had, like, for example, when I first got brought on board with American Humanist Association, and this is, I can actually send you links after this, but I came on in February, and then March, April, I think April is when we started rolling out and officially announcing our social justice adjuncts, the Black Humanist Alliance, the Feminist Humanist Alliance, and the LGBTQ Humanist Alliance. There was a lot of blowback from specifically within the humanist community. In fact, I even wrote a response up in response to that. I'll send you the links and you can see that. And I had one thing in particular, and then I'll shut up about this, but I thought it was funny. I had this one guy, actually, like, because of course I got a lot of angry messages. I'm used to that. I've been having those for years. That doesn't faze me. I think it's funny. This one guy mailed the AJ office, sent a letter. I know I still have it. I just have to find it. Basically cursing me out, basically saying that he spits on the AJ institution because we're actually concerned with social justice activism. And this is someone who allegedly has long been a humanist and long subscribed to AJ and all this, that and the third. So yeah, there's definitely people who identify as humanists that they are not concerned with being socially engaged in a way that, results in fighting for equality and justice.
That's interesting. I actually had no idea. And it seems counterintuitive, like you said, to be a humanist, but yet somehow frown on the social justice aspect of it. It doesn't really make much sense to me. I mean, what do you think causes that?
Well, I already know what causes it. I mean, there's certain people who are comfortable with their social positions in life. So when you quote unquote rock the boat, it doesn't matter how you identify. They don't have a problem with it. And you can look at how men react when women speak out against toxic masculinity, sexism, and misogyny, and things of that nature. Same thing when you talk about anti-Black racism, when you talk about white supremacy. A lot of white folks have pushback for that, even those who identify as humanists. Same thing with men who identify as humanists and say all types of toxic things about women or feminism, feminist theory, et cetera, et cetera. So
it's privilege, basically, is what it's about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No one wants to. It's just like Frederick Douglass said. No one wants. There is no progress without confrontation. No one willingly concedes power, whether that's on an individual level or institutionally. Now, that's not, you can't really make that blanket statement. Really, what I mean by that is it tends to be the case that there is resistance there due to the way we've been socialized, due to the way we've been indoctrinated to believe we'll put stock in certain cultural prejudices. So that it's going to be hard for someone, because of the way that they've been groomed to believe and view the world, to then be approached by someone who says, no, that right there, those beliefs that you have, they are mistaken, or they're wrong, or they are damaging, or they're harmful. People, they don't want to hear that in general.
Yeah, I think that's human nature a lot of times. And I had actually posted something about this regarding it's difficult. I think it was on your post on something, I don't remember. But it's difficult to overcome that sort of initial impulse because people don't like to be told they're wrong a lot of times. Yeah. And that goes for anything. And so it takes effort to overcome the initial impulse. And after the impulse passes, go like, well, am I wrong? Do I need to think about this in another way? And then actually get past that and try to be empathetic towards a person or the ideal that's being expressed, So I think that's a lot of it. Like you said, I think privilege plays a role in it. We've been socialized that way. So yeah, it's difficult to get through to a lot of people on that level. I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's privilege. I think probably part and parcel to that is that certain beliefs that we've been socialized into then become a part of our core beliefs. So when we're talking about core beliefs, that's something that's deeply ingrained within us. So it takes a lot. I mean, if we don't actually if there's no seed of doubt within us, if we don't have any desire, any curiosity to actually, want to question the things we have long taken for granted, then it's going to be the case that we're not going to want to hear what someone has to say about our worldview. So, I mean, that's how it usually goes, and then we'll kick and fight. We'll display all forms of rationalization. We'll ignore, we'll deny, that's, as you said, human nature.
So, I know it was fairly recently when the Humanist Association decided to have these separate projects for feminism, dealing with race issues and such. I'm trying to remember. It was a year. I don't know. It was a little while ago they announced that.
I want to say it was April.
Oh,
I think it was April when we officially announced, if not March. If it wasn't March, it was early April.
That seems like that got a lot of blowback. That was kind of the genesis of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Is when I don't know, this goes back to, well, I mean, why can't we all be? It's kind of, and this is another thing. Identity politics all of a sudden has become this anathema to a lot of people. Or we're all one human race and all this bullshit, to be honest with you. And
yeah,
I mean, we are one race. I mean, that's asinine thing to say. Of course, obviously we are, but that doesn't solve the issues of, certain groups being discriminated against, such as women, people of color, disabled. There's a lot of different subgroups that are historically been discriminated against. And I think this goes back to the whole issue of people being uncomfortable with confronting certain things, So how have you battled it? I mean, how are you, as the Humanist Association, how are y'all dealing with this issue?
To me, see, this is the thing. Before, when I was sitting there talking about how I had written a response to certain resistance or certain comments that I saw, like I would post screenshots and then I would riff on that or unpack it or whatever. I didn't even post that. I didn't even post that on the Humanist. I posted that on my blog, and I'll send you links so you can see what I'm talking about. The reason why I did that is because AHA doesn't care about these naysayers, because even though it seems like it's okay, so it was a considerable amount of blowback to a certain degree. Okay, that at the same time, that is just a small portion. So there still is a large part of at least those associated with AHA that were like, okay, yes, finally, this is a good thing. This is good that we're taking this direction. So when it comes to when it specifically relates to AHA, most members, they were not trolling. They weren't being negative or all those things. That was just a small portion of people. But in general, speaking more globally beyond AHA, yeah, there's going to be resistance. And when it comes to when you talk about identity politics, I think that's also part and parcel to what we were talking about before when it comes to social justice. I mean, identity politics is rebellion in the hands of those resisting dominant group values and expectations and prejudices unconsciously and willfully imposed on the rest of the population. So it's usually those who don't have to worry about certain forms of oppression that don't see the big deal with identity politics, like, oh, well, why do you gotta, or they'll vehemently, they strongly oppose it. They say that they use the term identity politics as a blanket term in a way to dismiss ideas or fights for progress that usually doesn't concern them personally. And so, I mean, it's used as a blanket term and it can be used to invoke a wide variety of vague or cherry-picked ideas of political failings. And I mean, that's like what greater foe? I mean, there's no foe easier to defeat than one construed from ambiguity, because the shortcomings are whatever you project them to be. So people can, I mean, I'm not worried about people. I mean, the term identity politics is an easy access punching bag, but those who trivialize or denigrate it do so from a position of comfort. they're not the ones whose humanity is being questioned or being attacked on a systemic and continual basis. So there's that.
So, for those people who are actually sincerely worried about this issue, but seem to have a difficult time understanding, I guess, from their position of privilege, having acknowledged that privilege, but perhaps failing to see certain aspects of how that privilege affects minority groups or affected groups or oppressed groups. How do you go about educating them in what that's about?
I mean, that depends. I'm not going to waste my time discussing an issue with someone who's not interested in actually learning. So when you have someone, I mean, you already know what I'm saying. If someone, you can tell the difference between someone who actually wants to know about a question or an issue or a topic on a sincere and genuine level, and those that are incurious and they're unconcerned with what you have to say. I'm not going to waste my time with them. And so usually what happens is when people don't have a more appropriate consideration for issues, social issues that are surgically targeting certain groups within society, and then they have the nerve to rail against identity politics, or at least the political engagement of those people from those certain groups based on their lived experiences and what is continually happening to them specifically. Those who have a problem with it, it's usually because they have a very poor understanding of what identity even means in relation to to our social reality. They don't really have that much of appreciation for social history as well, because when we're talking about identity, and by extension identity politics, we're talking about cultural context, we're talking about social history, we're talking about lived experiences, and the experiences are necessarily correlated with identity and provide both an epistemic and political basis for understanding. And I could go on and on about this. Matter of fact, I'm writing something, and extensively I'm writing, well, you'll see, but I'm writing something about all those things. But I'm not going to, I don't know. I don't see the need in feeding into those who really have no interest in actually learning. So those that actually do want to learn or do want to grow and better educate themselves or whatever, then, those are the type of people that I'll discuss this with further. And I think once this thing comes out that I'm writing, I think that will help in regards to that specifically.
Oh, good. Because I think a lot of people, I mean, like you said, I can tell personally, I can usually tell when somebody's willing to learn and really doesn't get certain aspects and kind of want to understand better what the whole thing's about. I'm willing to go ahead and try to, I guess my technique is usually just to be patient, try not to be easily offended, I guess. I don't know when certain terms are used, because they don't really, like I said, you can tell if it's a sincere, I didn't know, then that's different, and I can try to be patient and not be, like, what are you trying to say? Trying to be, because there's some people who just can't do that. There's some people who are very, and I've been this way, and I'm trying to get better about it, about being less easily, I guess offended is the word, when certain topics come up, if I can tell the person is actually interested in learning about it. And whatever you're writing right now, which I'm sure is going to be fucking awesome as usual, may be helpful for people who want to kind of have that conversation, but I'll leave it to when that's released to find that out.
Yeah. And you just reminded me, well, two things. One, a few months ago, or longer, I don't know, I wrote an article for Huffington Post that was in response to, did you know, I don't know if you saw this or read this or whatever, but it was in response to a podcast with Sam Harris.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of speaks to what you're saying, because I wrote the response and it kind of fleshes out some of the things that we're talking about here. It's the responses can be used as a quote unquote educational tool to show what is wrong with certain things that he said. It's not so much, I'm not trying to talk bad of him. I'm trying to, because he has a very considerable platform. So what he puts out into the world, a lot of people are going to eat it up. and most of them, especially if you are so invested in the majesty and the quote unquote greatness of an individual, then something it can tend to be the case that you'll just uncritically accept what they're saying, especially if what they're saying goes with the dominant story. It goes with the grain as opposed to going against the grain. If it's something that already agrees with the belief system you have in place, it's going to be easier for you to eat it up. And that's what the problem was with, that's the main issue that I took with what he said. It was less about him because, he's just one person. I'm not too much concerned about him, but it's the message and how that can adversely affect the public. And so the elitist rationalism and the way that he went about talking about racism, I had to address that and address why there were certain things a lot of things that were wrong with what he said. And, we're talking about, I went over social justice and I went over identity politics. And even when you're talking about responding to people, how, for example, if we're talking about sexism or the many manifestations of toxic masculinity, if I'm sitting there talking to a friend, a guy, and he's saying just some awful, nasty things about women, I'm going to, I'll address it. But how I address it is going to be very different than how I would respond to someone who's spewing some racist nastiness or something of that level when it comes to racism, because it more directly impacts my life. You're speaking more against me and you're directly dehumanizing me. So I'm going to respond differently to that, as opposed to when we're talking about toxic masculinity. I'm still going to address the toxic masculinity, but there is is different inherently in how I respond. So just because people will respond with anger, and some people try to use this against feminists and how they choose to respond to men who consistently, like, we are terrible, man. Like, men are bad, but how we continually denigrate women. And so then they'll try to use quote unquote emotion or anger against women, say, oh, well, why are you getting so emotional? I mean, first of all, there's nothing wrong with anger within reason. There's nothing wrong with getting angry, because anger is just one of many emotions. So you can't sit there. The thing is, when we're talking about how to quote unquote properly respond to someone, we have to keep in mind that, first of all, no one is objective. And those who think that they can address any issue calmly and quote unquote rationally, because they equate being calm with being 100% rational, they're missing the point. If you can be totally off-put and disconnected, what does that say about how you view these issues? I have yet to see one person who is truly committed, genuinely committed to seeking justice, to challenging the status quo that is harming and hurtful to many people and has resulted in political, economic, and social deprivations. I have yet to see a single person who is concerned about these issues address these issues calmly, because they see this and they have a moral outrage, and they feel a sense of moral obligation to address them and these issues. And when they do, they're angry about it. And they have every right to be angry about it, because they see people are being treated unfairly, So I always have a problem with those who say, oh, well, if you want to talk about this issue, well, then you need to be 100%. No, then I'm not sure that you understand what's at stake here. We're talking about the literal dehumanization of people.
I absolutely agree with that. And I guess I should have clarified. I'm only speaking of myself, what I try personally to do. And
I get what you're saying. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, but I see what you're saying, and I try to do that too. I try to address people. Well, when you're trying to have these conversations with certain people, what you're saying is true. I'm speaking more to those who demand, like, I'm not you, but those online or whatever that demand, people of color, for example, that they demand that we respond to them and to educating them about racism, what's wrong with this, that, and the third, or like when we're talking about, and I seriously don't want to get into it. I'm just saying when we're talking about all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter,
Oh,
like
boy.
we're tired of talking about the same thing over and over again for 2 years now.
Yeah.
The same thing. It's like, come on, man. Like I refuse to engage in conversations like that, like off a general principle. Because if you still don't get it after 2 years, then it tells me already that you haven't done any type of, not even a superficial research on the subject. Because there's plenty of content out there explaining it. Even I wrote something on it. And ever since then, ever since I put out that piece discussing the difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter and addressing all the ways that, what's wrong with All Lives Matter, I'm not going to discuss it anymore because there's content out there. There's plenty of content out there. But yeah, I see what you're saying, but it does tick me off when people, and that was one of the issues when it came to Sam Harris and some of the issue and what he took as an issue with Black Lives Matter. And being able to talk about issues, life or death issues, calmly and quote unquote respectfully. Nah, man. That's one of the things
motherfuck you. I mean, seriously, I'm just gonna be real, man. When I fucking heard that, I got so pissed off because I had heard that I think he said in the podcast, like, well, people were asking me to talk to like somebody like what's his name? Denise Coates or whatever, somebody like that.
Yeah. The way they denigrated him was terrible.
And then he brings some guy who's basically in his bubble, basically within his sphere, his ivory tower, what I consider kind of this ivory tower sphere he's in, and he just didn't want to confront. He didn't, like you said, he equated being rational with being calm with being rational somehow. Like, if you're angry, somehow you're just automatically irrational.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. He basically equated a person's inability to speak about these issues in a unaffected tone as being unreasonable. And there's there's issues with that type of stance for reasons that I already kind of explained. But, when we're talking about facing certain forms of oppression, especially if it directly affects you, of course it's that type of challenging that type of power and that dynamic is going to produce passion. That only makes sense. If you're not passionate about that issue, you're not going to exert so much mental and emotional energy and labor into challenging it continually, and that's what activists do.
Yeah, and I don't think he understand. Like I said, I mean, of course, use a buzzword privilege all the time, but fuck, man, this Sam Harris is like super privileged. Come on, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't really. I don't know. I don't know what his deal is, to be honest with you. He's like, what's wrong? What did I say? I was being calm and rational because you calmly and rationally call somebody, insult them. You think they're going to just be like, well, he calmly and rationally said it, so therefore I'm just going to have to say, well, sir, you're right. No, motherfucker, no, you're going to get pissed off. Yeah. And then he uses that anger like, well, see, you proved my point.
Yeah.
So, whatever. I'm done. Yeah. I'm pretty much done with him. When it comes, he just needs to stick to the atheist stuff. He probably just needs to just stay in his lane as far as I'm concerned, because he doesn't have any credibility to me when it comes to social justice issues. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've seen lately actually fairly recently you went to the encampment up there at the Dakota Pipeline protest or whatever. And I kind of wanted to ask you about that since it's still ongoing. And now I found out that the federal government or the government's going to keep supplies from getting put up there in the dead of winter. Well, it's not the dead of winter, but I mean, it's fucking Dakota, so it's got to be cold.
Yeah, it's definitely freezing there because it was getting cold when I was out there at the end of October. So it's definitely freezing there now. And I still have friends there, one of whom, just one example, Desiree Kane, she's a Native activist. She's been there since the summer. And she's also a part of the Feminist Humanist Alliance, a part of the advisory council. And matter of fact, we try to keep in touch as much as possible, but the internet and phone connection there isn't too good. But we just sent off a care package for cold medicine and stuff like that, because they were requesting it. But yeah, it's definitely, there's supposed to be, I don't know how many, I see different numbers being reported, but there's supposed to be veterans heading out there. What's today? The 3rd? I don't know what today is. Yeah, today's the 3rd.
Yeah.
I think the veterans are supposed to get there tomorrow, and then they're trying to, quote unquote, evict those who are at the encampments on Monday, December 5th. And that is going to be an issue because people aren't going to just walk away from this. So it's definitely going to be something. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm a realist. I'm not an optimist. So I think that things are going to get not good. I'll put it like that come Monday. Because yes, I was out there, and great people, and you have people from not only all around the country, but all over the world. I had this one guy that I was speaking to routinely. He was part of, he was heading one of the main, there's 5 kitchens there. He was heading one of the main kitchens there. He's native, and he was from Venezuela. So, I mean, people are coming from all over. And I've, like I said, Desiree's one, but I've had other contacts there that have come and gone from all over as well, both a part of organizations, a part of just individuals. And it's just funny to me. I'm not gonna talk you to death about this, but it's just funny how the residents of Bismarck, where they didn't have to protest, they didn't have to do all this to have the pipeline rerouted. The pipeline's currently being rerouted. Where it's going right now, where they're trying to lay it right now, is because the residents in Bismarck said, no, you're not going to do that here. Why? Because of the ecological concerns that they had. And so now people are saying, oh, well, people are resisting it with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. They're resisting it. And they've been fighting this for months. Matter of fact, it'd be technical. They've been fighting it for years, since 2014. But I'm saying, as far as when we're talking about more media and having water protectors out there, that's been, this year. So it's funny how there was no fight needed when it came to predominantly white, overwhelmingly white Bismarck residents. But now that it's concerning natives, when it's concerning their land, the government's basically like, fuck you. So
what the fuck is the issue? Okay, I'm trying to figure out, because what I didn't understand, first of all, how the hell they can route the pipeline. So I mean, isn't it like sovereign land for the tribe?
Yeah, when you're talking about the reservation, technically the pipeline doesn't go through the reservation. However, when we're talking about specifically the Standing Rock Sioux tribe reservation, however, the land that goes beyond the reservation, that pipeline still does go through the land that is still a part of that treaty of 1868, the Treaty of Fort Laramie, I guess. Yeah. Laramie, I don't know how to pronounce it. But, in that treaty alone specifically said that the land is reserved for undisturbed use and occupation of native inhabitants. So, yeah. But see, this is the thing. Like, this is an ongoing thing with this country, right? They have continually issued treaties or said that they're not going to do something, then they do it anyway. This is the thing about this country. We have, I say we, but you know who I'm talking about. This country basically took the land of these people, then erected a nation and excluded them from it. And they continually, at every term, erase them, and they disregard them. It's continual. This has been happening for centuries. So it definitely sucks. And I've seen the way that they've desecrated the cultural sites that you see when the people are talking about the cultural sites or sacred land. I've seen it personally. And there is, I have to look at the numbers. I think there is between 24 and 27 burial sites and 80 some cultural sites, artifacts and such that are going to be that, and some, I don't know to what extent that it has been the case, but they are all in the line of fire when it comes to this pipeline being built. And I don't know to what extent all of it has been desecrated, but definitely some of that has already been desecrated. And yeah. and as the song goes, and the band played on, right? This isn't the first. This definitely isn't the first, obviously, and it won't be the last time that the government basically said, get it out of our way,
And what makes it even more galling to me is just big oil's involved or whatever.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more obvious to me that it's like a corporatocracy more than anything else. I mean, that's just my point of view from it. I mean, let me kind of ask you, kind of segue into, oh boy, Trump. Okay. So, we're going to be facing some challenges, I think, when Trump becomes president. I'm wondering what you think as far as from a social justice point of view, how bad you think it'll get.
Well, I'll put it like this. I'll actually put it simply because I don't even think I have to articulate what I think of Trump and what Trump regime, what my sentiments are about that. I'll put it like this. Angela Davis said, and she has said, and she continues to say it because it is the truth. Freedom is a constant struggle. So even if Hillary had won the presidency, freedom still would have been a constant struggle. We still would have had a struggle. But now that Trump's in there, and obviously there are obvious differences between them, I'm not trying to create a false equivalency, but now that Trump is in there, it's going to be a continuation of a long established struggle. And it's going to be very challenging. The one example I can give, reproductive rights. That's definitely going to be an issue we're going to be trying to fight hard and have to fight even harder now, obviously. So, and we've already seen kind of that how, in what ways that Trump's election victory has resulted in inspiring some who think a certain way, who've always thought a certain way, to be more public. So you take, for example, today, actually, in North Carolina, the Ku Klux Klan is having a celebration march.
Is that?
Yeah.
Today?
Yeah. They're having a celebration march.
I heard about that.
Yeah. They obviously wouldn't be doing that if Hillary won, but I mean, that's beside the case. And then you have NPI, you have the National Policy Institute. Not last week. A couple of weeks ago, they held their meeting, their conference actually in DC here. And it's a white nationalist think tank. And they obviously are all about Trump. Well, I shouldn't say that, but they definitely appreciate the fact that he's going to be in office.
They all about some Trump. Come on.
No, I corrected myself because he, for however horrible and ignorant Trump may be, he does not have the same vision as those associated with NPI. So when it inevitably will be the case that he does something that is contrary to their vision, then they will, they won't be quote unquote all about Trump anymore. But as long as his regime, is to a certain extent a signal for the ways in which white supremacy can flourish and quote unquote make America great again, then yeah, they definitely enjoy that. But I wouldn't necessarily say that they're, all about Trump. I think that they like what he represents to a certain extent and how they can exploit that, him being in the position that he's in, and for them to garner more support, which they have.
Yeah, and they're also the ones that had the, like you said, the convention or whatever, and did the fucking Hitler salute.
Oh yeah.
And then the guy was like, "Oh, we're just trying to be ironic." Whatever, dude. And yeah, I've seen these outbreaks of Mexican or not even Mexican, like Hispanic people go home, or Trump's going to build the wall, so you need to go home, and swastikas popping up everywhere. And I just read something today about 3 drunk guys on the subway harassing a lady with a hijab on in New York, and nobody did anything to intervene. which is kind of heartbreaking. In New York, I would have thought, because I've heard this kind of thing has happened before, and there was a reaction, but not this time. So, I mean, there's a lot of that. I don't know if it's going to die down. And like you said, these people have always been here.
Mm-hmm.
They just happen to be more emboldened because
Yep, exactly.
Trump was elected, even though they're going to come in for a rude awakening when he starts enacting the same bullshit policies that Republicans have been enacting for the last 40 fucking years.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to physical things, and they're going to continue to get screwed again. I don't know how many times people are going to vote for trickle down economics before they realize that this shit's, against their self-interest. I don't know. Anyway, I would be remiss if I didn't mention your writing, I have to say. On top of everything else that you do, your activism, your writing, you have really come out to me. I mean, it seems your writing is some of the best I've read. And I'm not trying to, I won't kiss your ass too effusively, but the language you use is evocative without being overly flowery, is the way I'll put it. It's usually pretty incisive. It is very incisive, and you don't curse much, which I mean, that's not a bad thing, because I do, but I find a lot of people use that. You don't have to use that. You use other words, which I think more people would would benefit from. Was writing something that you've always been interested in, or is this just a natural outgrowth of what you're doing?
Yeah. First, let me say thank you, obviously. Much too kind. But actually, it's funny that you bring up writing, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I started being interested in writing in high school, but I was more concerned with writing on a more creative level and fiction and stuff. So what shaped how I write now basically is I used to be very religious. And so like 18, 19, 20 years old. And so when I began, it wasn't even about questioning, but when I wanted to learn more about church history so I could incorporate that into Bible studies and stuff when I do speaking, because I had actually, I don't want to say preaching because I wasn't a preacher, but I did have a couple of speaking engagements at church. But I wanted to know more because I've always been a curious person. So that was the thing, learning more about history. And that's what started me down the whole path of questioning and so on and so forth. So basically what started me writing in a more non-fictional way was when I started studying history more, when I started studying biblical criticism and cognitive science of religion and comparative religion, et cetera, I also started to read philosophy. And so philosophy just opened up so many things in my mind. And that's basically how I started to, that's when I started to write, I think more. I started writing little things here and there on Facebook like a few years ago. And then someone had me tap me. He was like, "Hey man, I'm starting a blog, da 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 da." It was called Old Piano. And so I was like, yeah, I'll contribute to that. But through contributing to that, that's what kind of shaped me, kind of forced me to write in a more coherent sense, as far as like, and I was starting to do interviews, and so I started writing in a more journalistic way, something I didn't do before. So that's kind of how I started going down the avenue where I'm, to get to where I'm at now. So it just progressed. But it's funny because I have thumb drive. So I was looking at an old thumb drive that I had. I just found it. And I have, because I used to write, I forgot this. I used to write fiction. I found a short story that I was writing, and I had typed it up. I didn't type it all up though, because I remember that I still had more down that I had written by hand. And so I found that to be funny. I was like, oh wow. Like I had like 2 or 3 chapters. I had 3 chapters typed up, but I know I had like another chapter written. I have to find it somewhere, but that's basically how that got started.
Well, like I said, I will press the point too much, but I think you're a great writer, and that adds to the kind of, I think good communication skills is, well, I think anybody would agree with this, is important with somebody who needs to interact with the public like you do, and or as an activist, and you seem to do. That's probably one of the reasons AHA tagged you to become their spokesman, and of course I'm having a brain fart, social justice coordinator. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that they that I think that's one of the reasons. I think also because of the ties that I already had to the work, but also you just reminded me of something when you're talking about how it tends to be the case that I don't curse in my writing, and the main reason for that is, well, two reasons actually. The number one reason is my son. I want to, when he gets a little bit older, when he eventually does read my stuff, and I want him to. I want to present content that doesn't have to use certain words to still get the point across. And so that's like something that I just decided on like a while ago. But then also, yeah, in a more general sense, like me personally, I curse like a sailor. I curse all the time. But when it comes to writing and trying to articulate my point, I don't think it's necessary to use certain words, and I may use them very, very rarely here and there, but mainly it's not needed. And I think I've shown that it's not needed to use certain language, but I don't have anything negative to say or whatever about those who do use probably, who choose to use that type of language. I mean, when they write, I just choose not to.
No, well, I have a blog that I do sometimes, and early on I'd curse a lot, but then I decided I started writing without trying not to, because to me it just comes across better to me, and it kind of forces you to think of other words that
exactly
that you wouldn't usually, and it's good for that, for your vocabulary in general. That's just, I mean, you have to look up in the thesaurus a word or something, a synonym for other than fucking. Or
yeah, it forces you to. That's another thing I think on a more smaller level. It challenges me personally because I don't know. I guess I was kind of a nerd when I was younger. Like I used to read the dictionary. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one.
I did that too.
Yeah. So I used to read the dictionary and stuff like that. So it's like also I see it as a challenge. Like, okay, now how can I describe this thing without using a common word? And well, instead of using a curse word, well, how else can I describe this? What else can I say? How can I be more descriptive? So that's kind of the idea behind that also.
Well, that goes to, I mean, ableist language is the same kind of way, or any language like that.
Yeah.
Like I talked to Anya fairly recently, and it's basically trying to use words that, like, even for me, like words like stupid or idiot or stuff like that, I have to actually sit there and think, because I used to use it so much that I have to actually say, well, what do I actually mean when I say that? What am I actually trying to say? And it forces you to kind of think about what it is what idea you're actually trying to get across, instead of being kind of lazy, basically. Yeah. Mentally lazy and just using a word like that. So yeah, I admire that, and we need more writers like you in the scare quotes movement, I guess you could say. So to wrap things up a little bit, what can people do in their own life to kind of help things along as far as being humanist / social justice?
Those who, I mean, I guess it depends on what they're interested in actually getting involved with. So I think when it comes to the AHA specifically, right, we started last month, we started a new initiative, a watchdog initiative called House, and the House stands for Humanist Optimizing and Upholding Shelter Equality. And so basically that initiative is about monitoring and confronting forms of discrimination that target transgender and gender nonconforming folks within transitional housing spaces. And so those who are interested in trans issues and trans rights, that's something that they can become a part of, and trying to be a volunteer and help out with that. Because, I mean, despite the U.S. Department of, housing and housing
and urban development.
Yeah. Despite them releasing a ruling that requires shelters to respect the gender identity of trans and gender nonconforming homeless people, the ruling still hasn't translated into ending discriminatory attitudes and prejudicial internal policies within every single transitional housing facility across the country, like obviously, So, that's one issue that people could get involved in. Well, initiative, I mean. Another one that this is going to be really cool. We haven't started it yet because, we're going to start it soon. I'm going to say in January. It's going to be in January. This was actually just brought to us a couple days ago. And so also, this actually goes into another thing. AHA is also an official affiliate of Showing Up for Racial Justice. So those who are interested in racial justice issues, they can also get involved with Showing Up for Racial Justice. And if anyone specifically, those within the humanist community want to find ways to get involved with that, they can just contact AHA or me more specifically. But since we are an affiliate of Surge, this is going to be really cool. So there's an initiative called Let's Talk. That's the name of it. And it focuses on creating a space for people of color and white folks to gather. So it's like a platform for people of color to talk about their experiences, their unique experiences, for white folks to listen, to learn, and to sometimes, to ask questions when, there's a certain time for questions and other times to engage in active listening, right? So it's an opportunity to take conversations off the internet, because these are all done locally, right? So it's an opportunity to take conversations off the internet to humanize experiences and to help create community and encourage change. Now, I really like this because this really speaks to what we learn in research about the impact of getting out there and actively engaging within personal spaces, not just internet, but off the internet, and engaging in perspective taking type of actions. And so getting involved in these types of groups, these local groups, it would be really, I see a lot of potential for this. So this initiative is the brainchild of Margaret Jacobson, and she's also a member of the Feminist Humanist Alliance. She's a part of the advisory council. And so there's already a chapter in Portland where she's based, and that chapter has, every single time they have a discussion, anywhere from between 150 to 250 participants. And so we're going to start up a branch here in DC in January. And actually, she's going to be flying out to help with that. But it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to be involved with that as well. So you'll definitely be hearing more about that very soon. But those are just two examples. So we're also, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, there's a surge here in Nashville, and actually I'm going to probably join that. They have meetings here.
Mm.
And as far as the Let's Talk initiative, I think that's spot on. I mean, there's not enough communication. People don't understand. I don't think a lot of people, white people don't understand what's going on a lot of times, because they don't. It's when you personally becoming acquainted with somebody, is when you can look at them face to face and they're telling you this stuff that it really starts to hit home.
Yep.
Things.
There's definitely a different experience, and it definitely hits you differently on a psychological level, and your responses will definitely be different as opposed to how you would react or consider those things online usually. So, I mean, it's similar to, there's another organization based in DC, but it's international. Actually, it's called Men Can Stop Rape. So, I mean, it's kind of they hold groups and they have discussions. Okay. But it's based around sexism, misogyny, and the ways in which men routinely, whether willingly or not, how we routinely subject women to the male gaze, and in a way that is very dehumanizing. So it's going to be, Let's Talk, I see, has very, very good potential for growth, and I'm hoping that AHA can be a part of that growth. So that's why I'm excited about that specifically.
So basically, people can just kind of, I mean, like you said, they can go to AHA. In general, I would think to see if they can find stuff for their area, maybe, or just, maybe do a search on your own. I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there. There's stuff here in Nashville. I know Nashville's a fairly progressive city, or wherever you're at, just do it. I mean, you can get in touch with Sincere. I'm sure he'll be glad to hook you up.
Hook you up.
That's right.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on and talking to me about this. It's actually been very enlightening, and I enjoyed it because you give out a lot of information, and you're doing great work out there. And I'm sure a lot of people benefit from that and are appreciative of it.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm trying. I'm one of many just trying, you already know, man. We only live once. That's basically what we all have to remember. We only live once. So while we're here, I don't see what the issue is with trying to make the world just a little bit better. I don't care how cliche or cheesy, whatever that sounds, but there's worse things we could do. So that's basically how I look at it.
Right. Just do what you can.
Yep.
Even a little bit, what little you can do, maybe you can't. Not everybody. I was talking to someone else about this. Not everybody's, person goes down the front lines and is shouting with signs or whatever. There's people in the background who do stuff to support movements.
Being on the front lines isn't for everyone. It's not meant for everyone. People can support progress in a myriad of ways. It doesn't have to be out there. You don't have to be the most vocal, most loud, most out there in front. Like, I don't want to be that. I'll take the supporting role, I don't need to be front and center, but there's definitely more than one way to contribute. Just like when we're talking about Standing Rock, you don't need everybody going out there, especially when you're not really prepared for what's out there. There's other ways you can participate or get involved. People can donate, So, there's more than one way to, work.
Skin a cat.
Yeah, more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to work towards progress. So
that's a bad phrase. Why did I
it
say
really
I
is?
love cats?
Yeah,
but yeah, you get what I'm saying. Yeah, and just whatever y'all can do, anybody can do. And I've stressed this lots of times. Go out there and do what you can. Help people. That's what humanism's all about. Work with whatever groups you can in your community. Try to stay local.
Yeah.
So. All right, Sincere. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and I'll see you online and read some of your awesome writing.
All right, man. Thank you for reaching out, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, you too.
That'll do it for this episode of the Podunk Polymath Podcast. I want to thank Sincere Kirabo for coming in and talking to me. It is a privilege and an honor, and he just laying down the knowledge like a motherfucker. So thanks a lot for coming in again, Sincere. If you want to check out the show, of course, you can go to the website, podunkpolymath.com. The music is by ... and their music can be found at cdbaby.com/cd/... Of course, there's also a Facebook link, and that's found on the About page, and I'm not going to say it because it's too long. Of course, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and Google+. Just look for the Podunk Polymath. You can email the show at podunk.polymath@gmail.com. You can become part of the posse on Patreon at patreon.com/thepodunkpolymath. Of course, you can call the number, which still nobody has called yet. I'm still waiting on that special 1-615 area code 378-7676, which spells Popo and also stands for the freedom you gain when you unburden your soul to me. So please call in. Somebody, please. Of course, you can also come to the About page and check out my latest tweets. You can follow me on WordPress. There are buttons for PayPal donate, for the RSS feed, Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, as well as the Patreon button. Of course, recent posts and recent comments. So come on over to the About page over at thepodunkpolymath.com to find all that stuff. Once again, I want to thank everybody for joining me for the show. I really enjoy doing it, and I hope you enjoy listening. And until next time, y'all take it easy now, okay?